Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the In the 11 podcast. I am your host, Brendan Griffiths, and this is the show where we bring on those from the world of football to show you what it takes to be in the 11 at the highest possible level. We've got some pretty cool new digs this week. There's a podcast studio in Perth that myself and Ryan, who's about to be on this episode, came and checked out, and it feels pretty cool to be a professional podcaster for the day. It's always been a dream of mine to do these in person and, have all the equipment and all that stuff. It would be super cool to have this one day for myself and do this more consistently. But so Ryan Hogan is in the 11 today. I don't necessarily want to use the term agent because we spoke about in the episode. It's not really kind of how he describes himself, but let's just say he's kind of the person who helped me get over here to Australia and find my club. And he works for an agency, or he started an agency called the PlaySport Agency, and works with players, sending them over to whether it's the American pathway in the college route or sending them to Australia. And he's also a player down here himself. So it's a really fun episode. It's really interesting, especially for all of you players out there who, let's say maybe you're an American and you're really interested in what it's like for me down here in Australia. He's a really great resource and has some good stories to share about his time down here. Whether you're a player from elsewhere in the world and you're curious about what it's like in Ireland or the UK, or you're curious about what it's like in America, even Australia as well. Great episode to learn a little bit more about what all these different footballing worlds and cultures are kind of like. So I had a lot of fun doing this one, had a lot of fun using all this cool fancy equipment as well. And without further ado, let me kick it over to myself. All right. All right, ladies and gentlemen, stepping into the 11 now is Ryan Hogan. And first of all, this is some pretty cool setup that we've got going on right here. Very different than the normal, I do these recorded remotely. So it's cool to do these in person. It's always kind of been the dream of what I was hoping for this podcast to be. So thanks for being, one of the first to be in an official studio like this and doing a real life podcast. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, glad to be here. Thank you. Great to be a part of it.
Yeah, awesome. So for those who maybe don't know, Ryan is actually probably the biggest reason why I'm actually in Australia here and playing football. And can you speak to a little bit maybe why that is, or how did our relationship kind of start, or I guess kind of your reason maybe for being in Australia as well?
I guess, first of all, how we met, I guess, back in November of last year, wasn't it? Roughly around November last year. Obviously, we connected on LinkedIn. You were kind of looking for a new opportunity to continue playing soccer somewhere. I had an opportunity in Australia that I was offering to footballers and soccer players like yourself. So I guess, we connected on LinkedIn, had a number of conversations, and lucky enough, you were interested and you kind of took on board the opportunity that I had, the opportunity that we discussed. Fair play to you. You took the risk to come to Australia, trusting someone that you never met before. But obviously, we had a number of conversations. It wasn't just something out of the blue. We were back and forth. I tried to provide you with as much information as I could so you could trust on what the opportunity I had over here in Australia was. And I guess now we're both here in Perth. You're playing football over here. We've obviously met up a couple of times. We've had a few different podcasts on my podcast and stuff. So and it's good to be sitting here in Perth. It's a crazy story, but
Yeah, it is kind of a crazy story, but as we've spoken about before, it's sometimes this seems to be the way that things just work in football. Like you got to kind of just take a bit of a chance, as I'm sure we'll talk about your footballing career as well and your journey kind of, that I'm sure there were a lot of points in your career where it was like, I don't know if this is 100% the right opportunity for me, but you know what? I'm going to take the leap and see what happens.
Exactly. Yeah. Quite a few. I'm sure we'll go through some of my events during this podcast, but like you said, you have to be willing to take calculated risks, try and take opportunities that are presented to you. But again, you, like I keep saying, calculated, you need to know what you're getting into. A lot of trust involved with meeting new people, whether yourself, you've played in Europe, America, and now Australia. Meet a lot of people during the way. Some people, unfortunately, it might work out as well. But other times, then it's you get to build connections with players, coaches, agencies, and
Yeah.
I guess that's the thing for me is, building relationships with different people within the game.
Do you feel like you kind of have a better sense now when you meet new people or you talk to new people in the world of football of like, because like you said, you've probably spoken to hundreds of, or maybe even thousands of people, whether it was for an opportunity for yourself or whether it's now, when you work more on the agency side of trying to get opportunities for other players. Do you feel like you have a bit of a better gauge of like, this guy seems like somebody who I want to work with, or is it still people surprise you?
A bit of both. Definitely a bit of both. I guess, for me, I've spoke to hundreds of coaches in Europe, America, Australia, players in Europe, Australia, America. And it's a difficult one, because you do come across a lot of genuine coaches, a lot of genuine players. Unfortunately, in this world, there are, some people, I guess, get, what's the word, unfortunately, things don't work out as they should do with some. And as in this business, you get to, you figure it out pretty soon who's on board with you, who you want to build relationships with, who you want to connect with more and more. And you find out which ones you might not want to continue working with. And that's the joys of it. You build rapport with some people. And for me, it's, I guess, in the world I'm in now, before it was more looking for myself and opportunities for myself, whereas now it's looking for opportunities for athletes where if it doesn't work out, it'll come back to me. So for me, it's making sure that I'm building good relationships. I know exactly, what coaches are at what clubs and what the clubs do for players, so it's definitely a learning curve, but you're always meeting new people. There's always new coaches at new clubs. Unfortunately, in the soccer world, coaches leave, coaches get sacked, or new coaches are hired. So you always need to try and build that relationship and find out, okay, is this a club or a team or a coach that I'll hope to work with moving forward to help more soccer players.
Yeah, because it's something that we've spoken about from early on in the process is like you have to really do a sort of a vetting process with every relationship that you have, whether it's a coach that you feel that there's enough trust there to send a player there and you can confidently tell this player, hey, this is a good opportunity for you. Or the flip side of that as well, like, hey, this is a player that's going to help your club when you're speaking to a coach, because as you said, like sometimes one not mistake, but one kind of relationship that maybe goes a little bit sour, that might be the end. And as we've spoken about before, there's lots of coaches, there's lots of players that are kind of maybe vindictive is the right word. And it's like, Ryan sent me to this club and they were terrible, so I'm never going to work with him again. And that's the reality of it. So I think you definitely, I could tell that from the beginning that you had a real focus on making sure you were vetting kind of each and every opportunity.
Yeah, I guess if we're talking about Perth, it's pretty easy for me because I know the area, I know the clubs, played against some of the clubs, played with some of the clubs. I know a lot of the coaches, a lot of the players in the scene in Perth. So for me, it's pretty easier. It's easier for me to bring a player to Perth because I know the ins and outs. It's when it's a player that might be going to Melbourne or Sydney. Now again, I know a lot of clubs and coaches there, but there's some that I wouldn't know much about. And then if they say, for example, a club in Melbourne will approach me and say, hey, I see you have a player from wherever it may be, we're interested in signing him. For me, then it's, okay, I don't know much about this club. That's where I got to do my homework to make sure it's somewhere that I want to send a player that I know they can go and, I guess, have a successful time there, whether it's for 6 months or whether it's for 12 months or for a couple of years. It's important for me to know that the player's going to get looked after. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of research, a lot of homework has to go in when it's not within, like, for example, when it's not in Perth. If it's somewhere else, that's for me to make sure, okay, it's going to suit the player, it's going to suit the club, it's a good fit, it's a good match.
Yeah. And so I imagine the Perth portion of it kind of maybe just started as you were playing around here, you were having lots of conversations with players, kind of bumping into coaches, and maybe just sort of realized that you could help facilitate some of these opportunities for other players. When did it maybe transition into more of like the agency model, like this is a business that I want to do? And I probably imagine then the next step of that was let's go to other places like Melbourne, like Sydney, Brisbane, so on and so forth.
Very similar to how it started with the US pathway. So obviously I have a number of players over in America at the moment, players who have graduated. Very similar to how that started for me when I was actually playing in America at the college level. I had a couple of, I guess when I was playing there, my coach at the time at Trevec University was like, hey Ryan, any other, Irish teammates of yours that you recommend to come over?
Mm.
And I was like, yeah, actually I have a teammate who's interested in coming over. Fantastic player. So that coach said, I was actually going home for Christmas. He said, oh, when you go home, can you just get some video clips of him training, which is with my phone? And I was like, yeah, sure. So that's the first player I could say I probably helped recruit was one of my mates from back home to go to Trevec University with me. So I went over as a freshman, and in my sophomore year, he came in as a freshman. So that's when I was like, got the interest of, I got a good sense of satisfaction that I've helped him come over here to America. He's now playing with me. So that was my first taste of helping a player make a move somewhere. Pretty similar as well in Australia. I was over here playing, had a few coaches saying, oh, any of your buddies from back home interested? Do you know any other Irish players? We're looking to sign a few more. I was like, yeah, I don't know. I know a couple of players from back home who I've played with or who I've played against who've kind of been asking questions. What it's like in Australia? What's the standard like? Yourself, what are the wages like playing semi-pro? And it was kind of just kicked on from there. That's when I kind of thought, there's an opportunity here for me to help more players have the opportunity that I have. And that was the key. It was, going from Ireland to America to now Australia, the fantastic, different people I've met, the different experiences I've had. And for me now, it's like, how can I help other players that were in the situation I was in when I was younger, receive the same opportunities I had? And so kind of that's how it kicked off. And then from there, I was just continuing to say, okay, how can I make this work? What do I need to do? What's involved? How do I recruit players? How do I place players? How do I get in contact with coaches and clubs? And it was just kind of a knock-on effect, really, for the last couple of years.
Yeah, I will say there's definitely I think you even spoke about this before, that there's a bit of a buzz that you get when you do get to kind of facilitate that opportunity for a player. And it definitely is cool. And I think it's also even just cool to think, I know for myself personally, to now be in a position where players will kind of say like, hey, what's it like there? Or could you maybe help me with something? Like I kind of still consider myself as a point in my career where like I'm still kind of out there hustling and grinding for everything that I've gotten. So it's a very weird thing to kind of have me be the person on the other side of the ask, I guess, so to speak, because I'm so used to like, hey, could I get an opportunity? Could I get a trial? Knocking on doors. I'm sure, was that at all like a weird kind of transition for you to kind of go from knocking on the doors to now people are knocking on yours, sort of?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, but it kind of started at a very young age from when I went to America. So there wasn't, from say the town where I grew up or back in Ireland, there wasn't many players who actually before me. I think there might have been one or two in that area who went to America on a scholarship.
Really?
So when I first done that, I had other players, I suppose when I was 18, 19, messaging me, how's America? What it's like?
Yeah.
How did you go about it? So I guess that's 10 years ago now. So for like 10 years, I've had players just asking, yourself, just asking questions. What's the lifestyle like? How did you get the scholarship? How did you go about it? To now Australia. How did you get to Australia? How did you find a club? What's the soccer scene like? What's the standard like? So I guess for me, yeah, it's been kind of normal because it happened from when I left Ireland at a young age. So
yeah. So maybe for people that are listening now and maybe have those exact same questions, can you talk a little bit about kind of growing up in Ireland, what the scene was like playing football, and maybe even what led to the decision to come to America?
Yeah, for sure. So I grew up in Cork, which is the south of Ireland. So that's Ballincollig was the name of the town, village. Played, started playing soccer when I was probably, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6, just for your local team. Training from the age of say 5, 6 up until, you get into your schoolboy years. So you're 12, 13, 14, it starts getting a bit more serious. I was luckily enough to be part of a pretty good schoolboy team is what we call it. So your youth teams basically. So we had a very, very good youth team from the age of probably 13, 14 to maybe 16, 17. We were one of the best in Ireland. They have what's called, like in America, the All-American champions. We had what was called like an All-Ireland. So from the age of 14, 15, 16 at All-Ireland tournaments. So we were kind of making finals, semi-finals, quarterfinals year after year, which was, fantastic for a club where it's not an academy of any professional club. It's like just your local team, your local town. Your coaches are, say, teammates' dads or, coaches in the area, so that's kind of where we grew up playing. We were just lucky that we had a fantastic bunch of players. Some of the players ended up going over to England, getting trials, contracts. For me, I never got that opportunity to get across to England. I was, local, for example, in America, which you kind of like regional teams.
Mm-hmm.
For us, we had regional teams that would be like, say, your local Cork team. So a number of us were involved at that level. So it was a good level. But I guess for me, it was always when you get to maybe, I guess, 16, 17, and you're not kind of going over to the UK, it's okay. What's the next step for me? You kind of get it. You get to understand, and you have to be realistic that, okay, I dream to be a professional footballer, but it's not really happening. So as you get to kind of your final high school years, you're thinking, okay, what are my next steps?
Mm-hmm.
Your parents start to talk about college. Do you want to go to college in Ireland? Or like, I wasn't huge into my academics. I kind of, obviously, football, sport, I was mad about. That's all I kind of done growing up, was playing Gaelic football and soccer, my two main sports. So I kind of heard about, not in my local area, but say in the region I'm from, of a player who went over to America on a scholarship.
Yeah.
Just kind of, just heard about it through people talking. And I was like, that sounds like something I'd be interested in. So I guess when I was finishing high school, and I was like, okay, I need to now figure out, what do I want to do? Where do I want to go? Luckily enough, there was kind of like similar to a JUCO in America, a JUCO in Ireland. They're kind of called FETAC level 5 colleges. So it's kind of like a step before you go into university.
Mm-hmm.
So they started offering, they had a soccer program where once a year they'd go and basically do a kind of a showcase tour to America. They play against, a couple of colleges, showcase. So basically players can showcase their ability in front of college coaches. So I guess, I kind of said, that's what I want to do. I want to go to this soccer program. I want to go on that showcase tour to America, and I want to try and get a soccer scholarship. It's difficult because there's a bit of money involved. It costs to go over to America, so I had to work, a part-time job while I was in that soccer program. Obviously, parents had to help me a bit, but that was, I guess, my first encounter with how I went from Ireland to America. Went on that showcase tour, had a pretty good tournament, and played. I think I remember we played 3 or 4 teams. I can't remember exactly what teams we played. We didn't actually play against the university I signed for, but the coach came and watched. So he was there watching.
Yep.
I remember I was back in the hotel room after one of the games. Just a phone call came through to the hotel room. Not sure how it came about. It was weird. So they obviously knew the hotel we were staying in. Must have asked for me. So I had this coach from a university in America on the phone while I'm in a hotel room in America. It was a bit surreal.
Mm.
So obviously, at that age, I was, I think 18 years of age at the time. Being told on the phone, we want to offer you a scholarship. We want you to come play for our program. Fantastic to me. That was music to my ears. I was like, yeah, definitely. So obviously from there, went back after the showcase event, went back to Ireland. That was March time. So then things started moving pretty quickly from there. Applying for the college, obviously having to get your visa because you're an international student. Scholarship offer came in. So obviously you had to sit down with my parents and discuss it. And for me, the longest I was away from home was probably 2 weeks, So then it was now getting pretty real. It was like, wow, okay, I'm going to be moving full time to America on a soccer scholarship. But so I guess, that's how it initially started for me. And that's how I got my scholarship offer to Trevecca University in Nashville, Tennessee.
So that was like first offer that came through, and was there anything that you were really looking for out of that opportunity, or was it just kind of like where there was interest, I'm willing to kind of go?
Yeah. Now I know, I guess, how the system works. Back then I didn't have a clue.
Yeah.
I really didn't. So by right, I should have been emailing a lot of college coaches saying, hey, I'm going to be we're actually in West Virginia. So I'm going to be in West Virginia for 5 days playing in this tournament, playing 3 or 4 games. Could you come down and watch me playing? So if I now say sitting here now, that's what I would have done if I had known how it worked.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, I just went over, was just seeing what college coaches. For all I know, there might have only been one college coach watching. We were just told there would be college coaches there, so I just took it as it is. So that was literally the only offer I had. Excuse me, at the time. So I just took that offer and went with it. Obviously, I wouldn't want to change it. I'm happy that offer came in from that program, from that school. Had a fantastic time, but I guess when it comes to now helping players choose programs and colleges in America, now we know that you can reach out. There's hundreds of colleges and universities in America. At the time, I really didn't know much about it. I didn't know the difference between the NCAA, the NAIA. It was more scholarship where it didn't really matter where, as in Nashville. I didn't really hear. I didn't know where Nashville was at the time. For my parents, it must have been a bit scary, thinking we're just going to send our 18-year-old off to Nashville on a scholarship. But to be fair, the college were fantastic. Everyone involved that obviously helped with the application process, and the meetings, the Zoom. I think it was Skype back then, so Skype calls, to with us to explain, where it is, what the program is about, the culture of the university. Because it was pretty daunting, to be fair.
Yeah, and I think it's also kind of daunting because, as I'm sure you've learned, as you've said, England, Ireland, Australia, or excuse me, America, Ireland, Australia, each system works a little bit differently, but America seems to be the one that kind of, I guess, is the most different, right? Because like there's nothing really quite like college soccer in any other country, and just even the way that you're describing it there, that doesn't really exist in many other places where you go to these showcases, right? And all these college coaches come to watch. Like, it doesn't quite exist the same way in other countries for the same type of level, whether you call it semi-professional, professional, kind of that sort of level, which I'm sure now experiencing all of those has helped you that much more when you go into your conversations with players, kind of more on the agency side of being so more familiar with all these different types of footballing kind of scenarios around the world, right?
Yeah, for sure. Because, like you said, the college system is a lot different. Every other country is like clubs, academies.
Yeah.
Whereas America, really, it's kind of getting a bit at the moment. You had to have their club academies now, whereas back then there wasn't really much club football. It was or club soccer. It was all the university soccer scene. But when you look at it, it was what they could offer you. It was a full-time environment.
Yeah.
You couldn't really get that anywhere else unless you were at the age of 18, unless you're signed to a professional club. You're not really going to be in a full-time environment. So to be able to, at the age of 18 to 22, be in what I call, it was like an academy. It was like a 4-year academy because you're training 5 days a week. The facilities, were fantastic. I know it's not all universities and all colleges have these fantastic facilities, but the majority of them do. And, to be an 18-year-old training every day, fantastic facilities, obviously there's the study part of it as well. You have to keep up, and at the time you're not really thinking of that. But now when I look back on it, I'm like, what a fantastic, you got to train full time, you got your degree as well.
Yep.
What more do you want? If at the age of 22 you don't end up going on to be a professional, you have your degree in your back pocket. So you have that safety net, and that's where, I guess, at the time you don't really think about that, but as you get older you start to understand how important that really is. To have. And like you said, with these showcase events, you never really hear showcase events for like academies in the UK or academies, or even, say, for example, professional clubs in Ireland. At the time, you wouldn't hear of those events. It was all showcase event for America. It was like, now it's getting more popular, to be fair. You hear of, say, for example, obviously now, even with myself involved in Australia, I'm trying to see what way we can hold showcase events over here where players can showcase their talent, because a lot of talent does go missing. They mightn't, get to be seen in front of the right people. Sometimes it's a bit of luck. You're in the right place, the right time, the right person's watching you. Other players, they're just not in the right place, the right time. So it's trying to give, I guess, as many players the opportunity, whether it's at the college level in America, whether it's semi-professional somewhere. Because at the end of the day, we all know that making it as a full-time pro, very small percentage.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean you have to give up. That doesn't mean you have to stop trying. There's other avenues, like the scholarship route, semi-professional route in other countries. So it's trying to get that out there. But yeah, for sure, like the American route, the showcase events, it was interesting at first, but I can see why, where they have their place and why they are very popular nowadays.
Yeah. And you just spoke to a lot of the positives about a college soccer experience, right? The degree, you can still really kind of pursue the game almost full time, depending on the way you want to dedicate yourself to it. And I agree there. Looking back on it, I think maybe I look back on college soccer just because I was so immersed in it. That's where I grew up in America. Maybe I look on it with a little bit of cynicism, but it really is a great opportunity that now, seeing everywhere in the world, kind of, it's very unique, and there's nothing quite like it. When you speak to players about, you've said you've had some players right now that are in college, and I'm sure you're probably also speaking to potential kind of prospects for it. What are some of the things that they get really excited about? And maybe what are some of the things that you kind of get some pushback for, of maybe why they don't want to go to the States?
The number one thing for players at the minute, if I'm chatting to anyone, say from 16 to 18, it's the full-time soccer.
Mhm.
They hear that and their eyes, it's like full-time soccer. They can now see with social media now. Say back then when when I was going over, social media wasn't as big.
Yeah.
So it wasn't as easy for me to see what the facilities were like in America. It was more of an eye-opener when I got there. Of, wow, how fantastic is this? Whereas now, kids and players, they can see the top universities, D1 schools, the facilities they have, the gyms, the pools, the ice baths, the recovery stations that they have, the crowds that some of the programs are now getting to go and watch games. So now it's a lot easier for kids to see, the experience of what America's like. And I guess it's that full-time environment of going in and being like a pro, Like I said, again, it's the training every day, the fantastic facilities, the gear that they get to wear now, they're traveling, the buses, the hotels, the flights. That's what these players are seeing. But then it's some of the pushbacks are, I guess, the studying side of things. For me, it's important to get that across that at the college level, you're going in as a footballer, but if you're not performing in a classroom, the college can stop you from playing. The head coach might want to play you, but he might be told, say, for example, if it was in my situation, if I failed a class or I was doing poorly in a few classes, Ryan's not able to play for the next couple of games. So they really, they focus on both the soccer scene and the study. So that's sometimes you get some pushback from players when they understand or when they first realize, I have to go and study as well. And then for me, it's like, this is important for you. You have to look at the positives of this, the impact it'll have in a couple of years.
Yeah.
That you will still be a full-time professional player, or not a professional player, sorry, a full-time athlete while you're in college, but you also will be a full-time student. You need to understand that. So that's where you get some of the pushbacks. Other times, I guess, it depends on what sort of scholarships are offered. Not everyone, it's very rare that you get a full scholarship offer in terms of, your tuition, your living, your board, your food. It's very rarely nowadays that a player will get 100% covered. So it's important to, not only the player, but sit down with the player, the coaches, the parents, and explain, okay, look, this is what we think could be offered. We won't know until we showcase the player's ability to coaches in colleges in America. But to be aware that these are the costs involved. In terms of, you got flights to America, obviously programs, they're not actually allowed to pay for a player's flights. Then you have, to be fair, look, with international kids, a lot of programs, they can cover like tuition, but there's the room and board. So the living costs on campus and the food. So you have to make sure like parents are aware of what the cost might be involved for this. But then, you explain to them how much would it cost for this player to go to college in Ireland or the UK, somewhere else. What will the cost be there? Are they going to be living, on campus, off campus? So there's still food involved. So when you take it all into account, there's pushbacks on the scholarship side of stuff. But when you kind of explain the whole picture of how it looks, that they're living on campus, most colleges have their canteen, so all the food's prepared and ready for them. So like, for example, so again, to answer your question, it's normally excitement that players, they get to play in these facilities, be a full-time athlete. But the pushbacks, there are a few in terms of the studying side of things. So you're just it's just a sit-down conversation with the player and the parents and say, look, this is important. You need to focus on your studies. Yourself, when you're 18, you kind of just think of the football and the soccer. But then in a couple of years' time, they understand, now I understand why that's the important side of it as well.
Yeah, I think it was interesting for me to learn, seeing from the coaching side as well, like being a little bit involved in college coaching, that scholarship part, because like you said, it's so rare to get a full ride scholarship, meaning everything is paid for. And a lot of times, college coaches, they have a budget of this much total money that they can give out to all their players. And so, that may be fantastic for you if you do get that full ride scholarship, but that may have just depleted, half or a quarter of that total budget. So now you might not be playing with that many other great players around you because they don't have the money to go and afford other players. So it's a lot of the similar ways to the way professional teams kind of build a team. They only have a certain amount of budget. So if they Inter Miami just went out and bought Messi, who knows who they're going to be able to now put around him because of the money that they have. So I think that is I'm sure it's an interesting conversation to have with other players.
Yeah, but also you look at it, it's a motivation that, some coaches will say, look, we can offer X amount of scholarship for year one.
Yeah.
If he comes in, he does well academically, you can get academic scholarships, a bit of extra financial aid there. If they perform very well on the field, we can up the scholarship next year.
Yep.
So it gives you motivation that a player doesn't come in and, not like most players would come in and they're motivated to do well anyway. Sometimes when there's that extra factor involved that, you
Mhm.
know, okay, next year I can get a better scholarship and it'll be easier for my parents or whoever's, you know, is helping pay for the fees,
Mhm.
that you'd be like, "Oh, I'm going to push myself even that bit more."
Absolutely.
It gives you something that, like you said, majority of players will go in anyway and they'll want to do well. But sometimes there's that incentive to kind of, yeah, you know, have a good season both on and off the field. And next year you get more of a scholarship again.
So when you finished your 4 years and you had that degree and you had that really amazing experience from the football side and culture wise and everything, was there a thought of maybe staying in America? Or, I mean, I guess walk me through kind of once you have that degree, what's next?
Yeah. So I was in my senior year and I was humming and hawing. Okay, what's next? What do I do next? I could actually graduate in December because just took a few extra classes as I was going along. Not sure why I done it, but you know, I was studying sports science and I was really enjoying it. You
Mm.
know, I love that side of it. So, I was able to finish my degree half a semester early, but I actually had a redshirt year. So I guess for people that aren't aware, say for example, anyone in Ireland listening, a redshirt year is when you don't play for the year. You're able to, I guess, hold that year, and you may be able to do an extra year for a master's or something. So it's like a fifth year of
Yeah,
a
because
scholarship.
everyone that goes to college in the States, you only have that 4 years where you can play.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, if you have a year where, let's say, you get injured or for whatever reason you can't play, you
Yeah.
can kind of save that year and then tack it on at the end or whatever as a
Basically,
fifth.
because in my sophomore year, I had knee surgery. So yeah, so it was just a cartilage meniscus injury. They had to go in and do a bit of a repair and clean out some stuff. So I actually missed that season. So then I had that red shirt. So my senior year, the coach was like, "Okay, what's the plans, Ryan? Do you want to stay on? Maybe do a master's for a year, and you get to play as well." And I guess for me at the time, I was thinking I'd love to go home and give it a shot to try and see if I can, you know, sign for a club and play in the League of Ireland First Division.
Yeah.
So where I'm from, you got kind of Cove Ramblers or Cork City, they're the two main teams. So I was kind of messaging some players I knew back home that were playing at that level at the time, and I was thinking, you know, what are my opportunities? You think I could get a trial or a few training sessions? So I had basically a club, Cove Ramblers, said, yeah, you can come in, you know, a few training sessions in pre-seasons because their pre-season was January. So it was kind of perfect timing for me. It was like, okay, I can finish in December, my degree, be home for January, and then, you know, have a few trials. So I guess that was my plan, really.
Mm.
That's where I wouldn't say I regret it because America, you know, there's some opportunities I could have stayed and done a master's in coaching and all that kind of stuff.
Mm.
But, you know, everything has its path. And that was
Yeah.
what was kind of for me at the time. But the last couple of games of my senior year, I started getting knee issues again.
Mm.
I was like, oh no. And I went to see the college specialist. I guess, look, every kind of program in college in America, they've got fantastic physios and
Mhm.
specialists and stuff. So he said, oh, look, unfortunately, at the time, he actually thought I tore my ACL. I was like, oh, well, there goes that chance for me anyway. But after more investigation, they opened up my knee. He was like, your ACL was actually okay, but there was a lot of meniscus damage again. So they had to take out more meniscus. And I was like, okay. He was kind of explaining to me the ins and outs. And obviously, I was studying sports science, so I understood what that meant. But the only good thing was, normally with the keyhole meniscus surgery, it's maybe, you know, it can be anywhere from 6 weeks to 12 weeks, you know, depending on how quickly you recover. So I got that done at the end of my season. So it was like in November. And I had these trials obviously at the beginning of January. And I was like,
window.
so yeah, so it was pretty tight. I had a few issues with the knee. You're trying to recover a lot quicker. But anyways, I managed to get there. I graduated, went home for Christmas, had Christmas obviously home, and then started training sessions and trials. I think I'd done, I'm trying to recall, but about a week, and ended up then getting an offer. Now, I do, looking back on it, I was nowhere near ready to return to playing. Obviously,
Body wise with the knee and stuff.
yeah, nowhere near. But obviously, it's an opportunity I kind of had to go for. So yeah, trained, got offered a contract. Now, when I look back on it, it was a fantastic opportunity, first division of League of Ireland, with Cove Ramblers, and the offer, you know, it was pretty small money, very small money, you know. But at the end of the day, look, I just wanted to try and play. Like technically, it was like semi-pro. You know, we were training 3 or 4 days a week, have a game, and then so I actually started working as well. So I started working. I had my degree in sports science, so I kind of started working in a gym, trying to get involved in that, just in case, you know, who knows what might happen. Yeah, so signed with them. First couple of weeks went all right, but then just started getting these niggly injuries again. It was basically because, look, yeah, I wasn't ready, physically ready, you know. Should have known that, but at the time, again, like I said, I couldn't waste this opportunity. So it just, it didn't end up working out. Had a chat with the head coach at the time, Stephen Henderson, and we kind of both just said, look, it's not the right time for me, which is totally fair. He kind of explained it to me from his point of view. And I said, yeah, look, I was obviously, thanks for the opportunity. It was fantastic. Had an opportunity. I was there for a couple of months, probably trying to think, maybe 3 months, which for me was fantastic. But I then ended up taking the right time to spend to recover. I actually stopped playing. I kind of, you know yourself, when it happens, you get injuries. At that time, so that was my third knee surgery. So I had one when I was younger. So that was the same knee, my third one. And when you leave a club like that, and at that age, I was 22, probably, 22. And you're disappointed. You had an opportunity. You didn't go the way you wanted it to go.
Yeah,
a bit of a knockback. So yeah, I'm thinking back on it now. I probably took a year out. I just took a year. Yeah, I didn't play. Kind of focus on working at the time. So I was working in the gym. I was trying to look strength conditioning stuff with teams as well, and I was loving that. It was fantastic getting to work with other soccer players at a pretty high level as well. So I was loving that side of it, helping other players. And I guess I was only 22, but at that stage I was starting to help players, and with their recovery or with their strength conditioning for whatever they wanted to go and do. And then I got that itch back. I was like, no, I want to get back playing. I was like, I've had a year out, felt physically good, So I was like, yeah. So from there, I ended up signing for a club, a club in Cork called Avondale. And looking back on it now, probably the best team I've ever been involved in. To think of it in Australian football, probably the MPL level here. But a well-known club in Cork, where I'm from, again, kind of had won all Ireland FAI Cups, what we call it, FAI Intermediate Cups, All Ireland tournaments. So I said, yeah, I'll do a pre-season with them, see how I get on. And so I played 1 year with them before I moved to Australia. And yeah, fantastic year. Played with some top players, as in leaders in that team. There was a squad of probably 20 to 25 players, and it was like top class. Every training session, I was only 23 at the time, probably, playing with some players who had played professionally but then dropped back down to this level. So had a year there, and season went fantastic. We ended up reaching like the All-American, say for example, in your country, it was an All-Ireland for me. So we reached that final. Again, we played in probably the best sporting memory I have. We played in the Aviva Stadium. Johnny Aviva, kind of where Ireland would play their national team games, 60, 70,000 seater stadium. Wow. Now, we didn't have that many people there, but just the experience playing there. And for me, that was my last ever game in Ireland before I moved there. So that's a memory for now anyways. Who knows what can happen. But, for now, my last game in Ireland was that final. We won it on a Saturday, and I flew to Australia on a Wednesday. Yeah, so it was the perfect lead up for me, because, again, like I said, I hadn't played for a year, wasn't sure where I was going, fell back in love, was with this fantastic team of players. Like, the team was amazing. Luckily enough, I got a good run of games that year, leading up to the cup final. There was a lot of players, quality players, were all battling for positions. You know yourself at the time, say for example that final, I didn't actually start. Had a bit of an injury leading up to it. I played all the cup games leading up to the final, but didn't start the final. So I was very disappointed, but not disappointed with it. Just yourself, when you're kind of, you want to be playing every game, you want to be involved. It was more for me, I look at it, I would rather a player be disappointed on the bench than be happy, because it shows that he wants to play. But then again, you still have to be supportive of the team and players. Luckily enough, after I think 25, 30 minutes, I got the nod to come on. So we ended up winning the game 1-0. Fantastic. It was a great day. And then so from there I won that on a Saturday and flew to Australia on the Wednesday.
Crazy.
Yeah. So it was an interesting couple of years, say, from going from America to Ireland and then to Australia.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. I feel like I have almost a similar experience to that.
Yeah.
Like, and maybe my period right now, and obviously, as we spoke before we got on the podcast, like there's a bit of a kind of dip in form, I guess, for the current club that I'm on. But it's funny how I feel like a lot of players have that kind of window where, for whatever reason, maybe they just sort of fall out of love with the game, and whether it's injuries or just setbacks, like, because the game has a funny way of kind of knocking you down a lot of times. And like you said, that itch just comes back, and there's something about it where you just don't quite feel done. Like something feels very unfinished about your footballing career. And then if you have that opportunity that seems to meet everything that you were kind of looking for, it can really lead to, now it's how many years are you on from that kind of Avondale experience? Like that was huge for you because now you're still playing the game. Like who knows, had you gone and that experience was terrible and you had more injuries and, it wasn't a good environment, who knows if you'd still be playing to this day. So it's, I don't know. That's what I'm so fascinated about learning about players is just like kind of the roller coaster of emotions you go through.
It's a lot of ups and downs when you're playing sport, not just soccer, but any sport.
Yeah.
There's injuries, there's difficult times when you're not playing well, and you're kind of thinking, am I good enough? Am I good enough? And you ask yourself that question: Am I good enough? Should I continue playing? For me, it was a bit of you come back from America, you had the scholarship, you signed for a League of Ireland first division club called Ramblers, and then you don't have a club, and you're like, oh wow, am I a failure? You start thinking a bit of, you're embarrassed, you're thinking, where am I going to go play next? And then if I'm not good enough at that level, people are going to be like, how did he get a scholarship? How did he, and that's something that's in your own mind. And for now, looking back on it, that's where now I want to try and help these players with these opportunities, because I was once that 22, 23-year-old that nearly stopped playing. And now I've had 4 seasons playing as a semi-professional, but you're still at a high level in Australia, when I was very close to not playing. And you see it happen a lot where, players come out of college, say in the US, or players in the UK or Ireland, and say, for example, like myself, got released or got let go from a say a club at a high enough level, and then they just stop playing because, like I said, like I felt at that time, I was like a bit of, was that a failure, a bit of embarrassment, and a lot of players then they don't get back in, and don't get back playing. And things can, you see things can spiral out, nowadays with, players, depression's a big one. You hear it a lot with players who played pro, and when they retire, that they're struggling because that's all they knew, that's all they wanted. For sure, it happens that players at 22, 23, 24 are getting released by clubs, and it's like their love of soccer is kind of, it's going, and it's like, where do I go next? So that is, again, one of the main reasons why I want to, help other players, whether it's the American route, whether it's the Australian route, just to continue playing, to understand that there's more opportunities out there. If you're not making it at the highest level, what's the next level? If you're not making it at that level, there's another level. There's plenty of levels that you can still continue to play and still enjoy the game, meet new people, new countries, new experiences. And it's like you said, sharing like your experience of going to Europe, America, and Australia, similar to me, but I went from Ireland to America to Australia. And when more players start to see and understand, it's like, there actually are other pathways. And that's the key thing, really, isn't it? It's just staying involved in the game that we all love.
Yeah, if you stay involved and you're open to other things, I think the 2 things that you just spoke about there that I really resonated with, one of which being, like you kind of said, that embarrassment piece of it. That was something that used to drive me crazy, always thinking like, if I would come home from Europe, are all these players thinking like, oh, how did he make it to Europe? How did he do this? He's not even that good. And like, that was a huge thing that I had to start of like drown out. And even, now being in here, it's like, you have to just kind of not care what other players are going to think. You have to just go out and play. And whether you're the worst, you're the best, whatever. And just, you've earned whatever opportunity you've gotten. So just go out and play. And that's all that you can really do, I guess, in that situation. And it's much easier said than done. I know that. But the other thing too is, I think, in doing this podcast, which has been really enlightening for me, is like, because I've been in that place where I've been in that depressed state. It's something I've spoken about on here, like that I've battled with it, and I think it's interesting to also see that there's so many other players out there that do go through it, and there's so many players even at levels that you would be like shocked. Like even a couple weeks ago, I interviewed a player like top level in Europe, and afterwards, like he was kind of like, like for even maybe a little bit still to this day, but for the first couple of years of my career, I had huge imposter syndrome. Like I would be in these training sessions like, how am I here with all these guys who are, so I think it's I don't know. I hope players can understand that, like, you're not necessarily alone in thinking, like, even some of the best players like Premier League and whatever, they still have those same doubts that you do about your confidence, or am I good enough, or all those types of things.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what level you're at, whether it's an amateur level or a pro level, semi-pro level. We all get injuries, we all have bad training sessions, confidence drop, confidence high. You do find that at an early age, there's a bit of, probably do care too much what people think. It's like, if I come back from America, or for example, you in Europe, if I don't do well there, but at the end of the day, it should be looked at. You gave, you took a risk, you took an opportunity, you gave it a go. Would you rather have sat at home thinking, I wish I tried, even if it didn't happen? At least you gave it a go. And that's the key thing, is to give it a go, whatever opportunities, take that risk, whether it's America, whether it's, just going playing for your local team, whatever it is, it's just take the opportunity and give it a go. You never know what can come from it. Like two of us now, again, like we're sitting over here in Australia. Again, for me, with the Australian pathway, it was a bit like, kind of came out of nowhere, really.
Yeah.
Like, I was obviously playing at home. My sister was living in Perth at the time.
Okay.
I had a cousin over here playing, and basically my sister was like, oh, you love it in Australia, the lifestyle, because obviously I was, my degree was like a lot of outdoors, the weather's lovely in the summer.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I'm not sure. And then my cousin was like, chatting a bit more to me about the soccer scene, what it's like over here. Because I didn't really have any clue. Again, it was trying to Google then, okay, what it's like in Australia at the NPL level or state league level, and just getting more information. And then I guess for me, it was my cousin got me chatting to a few coaches, ones that he knew or that he played for. And I guess, it was like, I didn't get offered a contract. It was like, yeah, if you're over here, you can come train with us. You can come trial, see what you're like. There was no contracts on the table. There was no talk of wages. There was nothing. It was like, you come over, no worries, we'll have a look at you. And to be fair, I had a decent enough CV from where I was from playing. But I was like, yeah, all right, do I take this risk? I was like, yeah, all right, why not? Let's just give it a go. See what happens. And for me, that's just booked a flight, got my visa, and just kind of flew over. I was like, all right, yeah, let's see how it goes.
Yeah. So I guess, talk to me about, you said cup final Saturday, flight out Wednesday. Do you just walk right into a team and things kind of go well, or did you bounce around teams a little bit, or?
Yeah, so obviously, played the cup final. I actually didn't even tell the coach I was leaving, because I was afraid it'd affect my starting position in the cup final. And then afterwards, he was like, I knew. He was like, I knew for ages, but he totally understood. And it was a fantastic coach. But yeah, so I flew over. It was so I guess that was June 4 years ago. So it was mid-season. I didn't even know, as in when was preseason, when was off-season, when was in-season. Yeah. So it was a difficult time. Unfortunately, actually, in that final again, when I came on, I got a bad knock on my knee. I was like, oh no, but it was nothing serious. But I had a couple of weeks out. So I had a couple of weeks out, was chatting to coaches and clubs, went watching games, kind of spent the first few weeks kind of figuring things out, what it's like over here. So then I actually made the decision to focus on, right, I'm going to train, get fit, and I'm going to focus on November.
Yeah.
So I didn't actually sign or train for a team in that first couple of months. Obviously, I got that knee injury, so I was a couple of weeks out. Then I actually missed the transfer window. So it would have been signing for a club for the last maybe 6 or 7 games. So I was thinking, all right, no, look, I'm going to aim for preseason. So yeah, it was just basically at the beginning was, picking up the phone, calling a few clubs. My cousin that lived there had a few contacts, some other Irish players who played at a decent level over here. So I got in touch with them and got me training. So I came down to, at the time, I was training with Bayswater, was the first club I went training with. Fantastic. I was there for a couple of weeks. Pre-season here, so it was a few weeks leading up to Christmas, and then really knuckles down in January, as you're aware. So January was really the crunch time. My sister was actually getting married that January, so it was a difficult one. So I had a lot of family over here. My sister was getting married in Perth. There was like a trip to Bali, so I was like, so I'm trying to focus on a lot going on there with everyone coming over, and then trying to impress and train at clubs. And so I was training with Bayswater, fantastic. The team was very good, but they were in the NPL, so there was only 2 visa spots. I was thinking, again, questioning, am I good enough for this level? Only 2 visa spots available. Am I going to get in? Then obviously I was made aware of the state league. There was no visa rule. Yeah. So I was thinking in my head going, right, will I go and train in maybe a few state league clubs? No visa rule, see how I get on at that level. And if I'm good enough, I can go play in the NPL. So then I just had a training session with Stirling at the time. They got relegated from the NPL, so they were in state league. And I was thinking, okay, went for a training session similar to yourself. Had one training session and was offered a contract. And at the time, I was like, buzzing. I was like, yeah, definitely. First offer, whatever they said to me, it could have been $20, and I would have said yeah. And it was great because my family were all over for my sister's wedding. So I was able
awesome.
to go, I just got offered this contract and I was able to chat to them about it. So it was brilliant. They got to watch. We'd won preseason game when they were all here as well. So, it was a great start to that really. So that's where that came from really. Yeah. Just again, like I said, was ringing around, but I could have had a few more training sessions, but I just settled in at the time who the coach was at Stirling. I just like the club, like the setting that was there, like the coach. So I signed there, my first club.
Nice, yeah. And then, so was it the following season when you joined Inglewood, or did you stay 2 seasons with?
So unfortunately, then COVID hit.
Oh, that's
yeah. So COVID hit. Now the season we were lucky in WA that they kind of blocked the borders off. So our season still went ahead. There was a few interruptions. There was no promotion relegation. So even though we could have won the league, we weren't going to get promoted. So it was a difficult season. It was difficult for clubs. No fans were able to come. So it was difficult for clubs to fund, the wages, things like that. There was pay cuts. Obviously, players had to take pay cuts that season. But yeah, we played that season. We ended up making the top 4 cup. They still had a top 4 cup. We lost in the semi-final. So that was a good first year for it to be a COVID year. So then I actually stayed again with Stirling the second year. So re-signed. They brought in a new manager, new staff. Ian Ferguson. I don't know if you're aware of him. Yes, played with Rangers in Scotland for years. Fantastic coach, really good coach. So he came in and brought in a lot of quality players. There was a good team there. So that was kind of, I guess, my first proper season State League One, because COVID the year before kind of interrupted it. We went on to win the league quite comfortably. I think we had maybe 5 or 6 games to go, and we had it wrapped up.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a great season.
And that's tough to do in it's only a 22 game season.
Yeah, I'll have to look back now, but it was definitely
maybe comfortable going into the end.
Definitely 4 or 5 games to go. We had it wrapped up. We had a fantastic year. A lot of tough games. We had a lot of last minute winners, things like that. Gav Knight was our main striker, who you're now playing with. He came up with some clutch goals for us that year. So so that was obviously a fantastic year. Won the State League, got promoted into the NPL, and from there, then obviously you're in the NPL. A lot of things happen. Clubs, coaches, you're only at kind of a 1-year contract, so you're not really tied to any club. So you have coaches kind of chatting and calling, what are your plans for next year? It's like, I'm not sure yet. We'll see what happens. But to be fair with Stirling, a fantastic time there. I loved it. Fantastic club. Probably one of the best supported clubs in WA in terms of the crowd they get at their games. But they'd signed a left-footed centre half who was a quality player. So I kind of in my head was like, not that like I could have stayed easily. Could have no issues with that. But then obviously when other opportunities come in and other clubs come in, and you have a look at that club, and I just thought when Inglewood, gave me a call, a fantastic opportunity from what I've heard, from what I could see. Knew one of the other guys that they just signed. So I was kind of going in as a visa player. They can only sign 2 visa players. So I was like, it just seemed like the right move for me at that time, and I made the move to Inglewood.
Nice. And that kind of more or less brings us up to current day. And I know you got to run soon, so I want to make sure that we talk to just kind of about the agency part of it. We kind of spoke to the the origin of it and how it's gotten to this point. But I guess maybe just talk to me a little bit about what's kind of been going on with as I see you're wearing the shirt as well, Play Sport Agency, and maybe what even some of your goals are for it, and if players are out there listening, what would be kind of the best way to describe it to them?
Yeah, so I guess obviously working with the players, say from home, going to the US before I moved to Australia, and I wanted to keep that going on the side, and I was still trying to help as many players as I could. Obviously moved to Australia, and then just have more players inquiring about the Australian pathway. How did it come about? What's it like over there? So I guess during the COVID year, really, I was thinking to myself, there's definitely room to start something here. I love helping players. I love chatting with players. I love that aspect of trying to give more players opportunities again, because I received them. It was trying to use my experience to help other players.
Yeah.
So I just thought, why not give it a go? Why not try and set up my own kind of recruitment agency kind of thing, soccer recruitment, and see what kind of players I can help make the move to the US or Australia. Started from scratch, really, just said, let's give it a go. I had a lot of players just inquiring through socials and stuff. So started working with players from back home and placing, players over here in Australia and the US, continue to do it both. And it just continued to, just a rolling effect. You start building a website, start building a social media platform. And I was like, okay, let's see where I can take this. And like I was saying before, it's that satisfaction, that buzz you get from just helping a player, and you come over and you see a player doing well. You know, for example, when you were scoring a few goals there, and it was but getting this just to be a little part of, not that I'd done anything for like that, not
be
that
a part of that,
just be a small part of helping a player make a move, and then seeing a player doing well and being successful. It just gives you, you know, for me anyway, it's just something that I'm obviously passionate about, because it gives me that feeling. So now the plans are to keep that growing. Luckily enough that we've got, you know, more people interested, more kind of companies who want to collaborate. At the minute, we're not announced yet, but we're, you know, I was chatting to you before about kind of a showcase tour for a UK team to come over here, play against a couple of MPL Stadia clubs, showcase their ability in the hope that these players get signed. So that's in the pipeline. And it's just about, growing the company and seeing how many players we can help. Things like, again, like I said, the tours. So that's going to be a big thing going forward, is bringing over teams here and playing against friendly teams in Perth, Melbourne, Sydney. So that coaches over here can see these players in action, and then hopefully get them signed, and then, you know, figuring out ways, okay, how can we now get these players settled in over here? You know, because there's a lot of things involved, like visas, the soccer side, the work side. It can be, you know, what can we provide for these players to the best of our ability? So yeah, I guess a few things lined up for this year and moving into 2024. And it's, again, you know, both in the men's and women's game. You know, we've got some fantastic women's players over here at the minute. A couple of players, you know, we've Kayla Deaver in Melbourne, just doing fantastic. You know, she's playing in the MPL. Again, it's open opportunities, not just for men's football, but for women's football. It's continuously growing. You know yourself, the level of, you know, with the women's football over women's soccer football, the women's soccer over in America at the college level, you know, there's some fantastic players there. So it's opening up those opportunities for players that are interested in coming to Australia, and then helping them find clubs, helping them get settled in. And that's the key thing for me, really. It's just right now is to continue, you know, steadily growing this as much as we can. And it's fantastic to see, you know, other companies and other teams are now looking to get involved. And again, it's down to not me, but it's down to the players that are coming over here are doing well. You know, for example, a couple of you guys at Subiaco, always great things you hear back from the club, and that's huge for me, because if it wasn't for the players, I wouldn't be able to do this. In terms of, you know, if the players weren't coming over and their characters on and off the field, you know, if it didn't work out, then clubs wouldn't come back to me and say, "Oh, do you have any more players?" So, you know, a big shout out really to any players that I've helped over here that are doing well both on and off the field, and that's the reason why then clubs are coming back and saying, "Oh, have you got any more players? You know, have you got any players that we can look at?" Because obviously, the guys and girls that are over here are doing fantastic.
Yeah, and this has kind of been a theme that we've talked about all episode here. But do you look at it as kind of that, where, you know, like, and I've met a lot of the players that you've brought over here as well, and you know, you hear good things about them, and obviously you can also see what they're doing on the pitch as well, and that goes a long way too. Do you look at it more of like, I want to make sure each and every player that I have here, like, they're the right type of people for, you know, who my company is, versus, you know, I'm sure for you, it's not just about like, how many can I really get, right? Like, it's also got to come down to the right type of people.
Yeah, for sure. Look, unfortunately, I'd love to help as many players as I can. You know, I get a lot of messages from players.
Yeah, I was curious about that. Like, how many like emails, LinkedIn? I'm sure your inbox is always full.
Yeah, it's crazy, to be honest. It is crazy, and I don't just say this to people because it's meant to, as in the amount of messages through LinkedIn, emails, social media, that players that want opportunities. Unfortunately, we can't help everyone, because if I help all these players, number one, I can't give my time to all these players. Just won't have enough time in a week. And also, you know, you have to filter through the players. You need to know, okay, can they get a visa, first of all? And then you need to find out the characters, where they've played. So there's a lot involved. It's not just simply, yeah, no worries, I'll get you a club, and then blah, blah, blah. There is quite a bit involved. You know, there's research into the player, conversation with the player. Because like you said, yeah, for example, if we had, I don't know, some sort of database where we could help thousands of players. But then again, it's more the connection that you can build and relationships you build with these players as well. And I know exactly where the players are, who they're with. If you have 1,000 players over here, you know, will I know all their names?
Yeah.
You know, that personal effect that you want to have.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's players that I have in Sydney and Perth that haven't had a chance to get over there and meet yet, but you're constantly watching the games, checking in on them, how are they getting on? Because I guess one thing is, like, I'm not an agent. I don't like the term agent, or it's like, no, it's like a recruitment agency, like recruiting players, placing players, helping players. There's the wider aspect of it. We're not dealing with professional clubs with salaries that are big salaries, where it's a difficult one. So unfortunately, yeah, we can't help as many that many players. Like, we can help quite a few, but again, like I said, it's picking and choosing. To say it right, it's like, it needs to be a good fit for the company kind of philosophy that we have. A good fit for the clubs, the coaches. It needs to be a good fit for everyone. So I guess to answer your question, the plan is to help as many players as we can, but there has to be a filter to it in terms of, okay, how do we go about this in a professional manner to make sure that the players get the right time, that we can do the right thing for the player, for the club.
Yeah, it completely makes sense. Well, yeah. I mean, I know you've got to run. You've got more meetings already. What's this, third or fourth meeting of the day that you gotta get to? So I appreciate you. I appreciate you so much taking this time. Obviously, I've said it to you before as well. I appreciate all that you did just to get me over here in the first place, as you mentioned.
At the end of
us being sitting in a podcast studio in Perth, never would have imagined it. So
that's the thing, like, I used to have very close mates that I met in college when I was 18. It's crazy the people you meet when you're playing sport, when you're playing soccer or sport, or when you're taking opportunity. Like, a year ago, we didn't know each other. Now we're sitting here in Perth chatting about your journey, my journey, what we're looking to do. It's a funny old world.
It really is.
But yeah, look, I'm sure we've got. To be fair, we could probably sit here and talk about journeys and events that things that can happen, and try and give more information back to players that were in a similar situation that we were. But look, fantastic to come on board. Obviously, again, a shout out to your podcast. I've watched videos and the interviews. That's something that I want to get into as well. Seeing what you're doing and how you're chatting to players and the different pathways that different players have followed. It's interesting, isn't it? Like you said, to hear every player's, there's different stories, different background stories. How did they get to where they were? It really is interesting. So hopefully, at the end of the day, these podcasts that you're doing, that I'm hoping to do, is just about giving out free information to players who, again, might be in a similar position that we were in, looking for opportunities, and hopefully that they can reach out, ask questions, and I'm sure you're getting questions from people, what's Australia like.
Yep.
So again, always open for players to ask questions about anything really, the US pathway, the Australian pathway. And hopefully I'm sure we'll have a couple more topics, a couple more podcasts that we can jump on.
Yeah, for sure. Whether it's on mine, or, as you just mentioned, you're going to have a podcast as well, kind of around the agency and around other players that you brought here, and maybe beyond that as well. So definitely check that out as well. But yeah, thanks,
cheers, man. No worries. Thank you. Cool. Until next time.
All right, that's it for this week. Thank you once again to Ryan, who was just with me here on the podcast, and had a lot of fun doing this one. Had a lot of fun catching up with him, seeing what's been going on in the past couple of weeks. We kind of talked a little bit before we jumped on the pod, and then also just hearing more about his journey. I didn't know a lot of that stuff going into this episode. We've had a bunch of conversations, but a lot of it's been about, me coming over here, or just what it's like in Australia. So really curious to learn more about him. And it was cool to hear his story and hear that there was a lot of similarities in both of our journeys. And yeah, had so much fun doing that one. Hopefully, looking forward to doing more content with him. As I mentioned, check out his podcast as well, which should be coming up soon via his agency. Check out PlaySport Agency. And also, thank you all to you guys out there who have continued to listen. We've got a couple of episodes now coming out here again, in a little bit more of a consistent clip. So hope you guys are enjoying all those. If you're looking for anything more specific or specific content, definitely let me know. As I mentioned, we can do more of the individual episodes, or more guests, or whoever. Yeah, I'm definitely hoping to do a couple more episodes in this studio while I have this at my disposal. So maybe get a couple of my teammates in here, a couple people elsewhere from around Perth that I think would be a really good interview for all of you guys to share, because this was a lot of fun. As I said in the intro, a lot of fun being a professional podcaster for the day. So thank you guys for listening. Thank you for watching wherever you're watching. And if you want to support the podcast just that little bit extra, patreon.com/in the 11pod. where you get access to the episodes a day before anyone else does. And as we kind of go into the future with more people joining the Patreon, there's some other things that I'm really excited about doing. If you listen to the Coach Zach episode, there's probably some merch that's coming down the line. There are just exciting things when it comes to content too that I think would be cool that we could do for the Patreon. But we got to run those numbers up. So go ahead and do that, patreon.com/in11pod. That's about all from me for this week. Stay tuned, as next week there'll be a new episode coming out. And I look forward to seeing you guys then. All right. Catch you later. Peace.